Chapter 2091, Consumables. Now that Deng Shintong had completely joined Zhang Yi's camp, coupled with Zhang Yi's investment in Deng technology, the two families had become extremely close. They naturally had to consider obtaining a large amount of resources from the Deng family to prepare for war. Mr. Zhang Yi, I've already heard about what happened from Deng Shintong. Deng Yuanbo pointed at Deng Shintong and said, "This kid is too tight-lipped. He didn't tell me anything else. He only said that you have some conflicts with the Wulwan Empire, and they are angry and want to take revenge on you." In fact, Zhang Yi didn't mind letting others know about the task of sealing Mammon. After all, the world's major powers were involved. Deng Yuanbo meant that Zhang Yi should have no worries about Deng Shintong, who would not betray him. Zhang Yi did not beat around the bush and asked, "If I want to wage war against the Wulwan Empire, not even a full-scale war, but just a revenge operation, will the Deng family support me?" The smile on Deng Yuanbo's face deepened. This was no joke. The strength of the Wulwan Empire was obvious to all. If they mobilized all their forces, they could even destroy the entire Huashu kingdom. Of course, that was more than half a year ago. But even if the Huashu kingdom's strength had increased, it would still be difficult to compete with the Wulwan Empire. In terms of top fighters, technological level, and number of mutants, they were lagging behind in every aspect. Wanting to start a war did make some people think that Zhang Yi was overthinking things. However, Deng Yuanbo only thought about it for a moment before saying sincerely, "We completely trust Mr. Zhang Yi's abilities. Whatever you want to do, we will definitely help you." Choosing sides was very important. The more critical the moment, the greater the reward for choosing the right side. Moreover, Deng Yuanbo understood Zhang Yi's character. He was not a madman who would act impulsively and try to defeat a stronger enemy. Zhang Yi would only act when he was fully prepared. Zhang Yi smiled faintly, he very satisfied with Deng Yuanbo's statement. However, what kind of help could the Deng family really give him? Zhang Yi was very curious. At the moment, he had people and weapons, and he really didn't lack much. "What can the Deng family do to help me?" Zhang Yi asked directly. A calculating look flashed in Deng Shintong's eyes, as if to say, "What, are you looking down on the Deng family? Kid, I'll open your eyes." Mr. Zhang Yi, you are indeed straightforward. Then I won't beat around the bush. Our Deng technology has been researching mutants for several years, collecting all kinds of information on mutations. Of course, it is also thanks to you taking my nephew on many battles in the north and south, obtaining a lot of important information. Now, our research has made great progress. Please come and take a look. Deng Yuanbo motioned for Zhang Yi to follow him to the back of Deng Manor. Deng Shintong was also curious. "Uncle, do you have something new?" The curiosity on his face was genuine. It seemed that even he had not been told about this new research. Deng Yuanbo still had a mysterious smile on his face, but he did not answer his question directly. Research takes a lot of time. He led the two of them to the back until they arrived at his study. Controlled by smart devices, the study quickly changed its appearance. Like building blocks, the floor and walls were rearranged, and then, under the 3 layers of thick flooring, an elevator appeared. This is the most confidential secret of Deng technology. I guarantee you'll be interested," he said mysteriously to Zhang Yi, his eyes full of confidence. "Oh?" Zhang Yi became curious. At this point, there weren't many things that could interest him. Deng Yuanbo didn't say much and directly invited them into the elevator. The elevator descended all the way down to more than 500 meters underground before stopping. At this location, even if the Reaper of Love was detonated on the surface, it would not have much effect. Building an experimental base 500 meters underground would require a lot of time, materials, and manpower. This base was definitely built before the end of the world and had probably existed for a long time. The three arrived at the underground base, which was filled with soft white light and did not feel gloomy at all. But for some reason, Zhang Yi sensed a cold aura. He was very familiar with this aura. It was a pheromone released when someone of the same species died, warning others of their kind to stay away from the area. He had felt this aura on battlefields and on land where many people had been buried. Zhang Yi frowned slightly. Many people had died in this place. Many, many people. Deng Yuanbo walked ahead, leading the way, and as he walked, he said slowly and calmly, "What you are about to see may cause you some physical discomfort. However, I don't think it will be too difficult for you to accept, given your extensive experience in battle. After all, behind the light of this world, there will always be darkness. But darkness also carries light. Just as black coal can be lit to bring light and warmth. Nobel invented dynamite, which killed countless people, but it also saved many more." Deng Yuanbo spoke slowly, which made Zhang Yi feel strange. "What are you trying to say?" Zhang Yi asked. "Don't worry, you'll see soon." Deng Yuanbo still had a smile on his face as they passed through one laboratory after another. Along the way, Zhang Yi saw many laboratory workers in white coats fiddling with test tubes and beakers. He also saw some larger glass containers filled with strange flesh. Looking closely, he vaguely discovered that they were human embryos. The strange feeling in his heart grew stronger. Finally, Deng Yuanbo led them to a glass wall in a laboratory and stopped. The glass was pitch black, and he couldn't see what was inside. Deng Yuanbo waited until Zhang Yi was close before turning on the lights. In an instant, bright lights revealed everything behind the glass wall to Zhang Yi. It was an enormous laboratory, like a huge farm. However, it wasn't animals that were being raised inside, but countless huge glass containers. Inside those containers, small baby embryos were sleeping. There were so many that it was impossible to count them all. "What are these? Are these mutants that you cultivated through genetic engineering?" Zhang Yi asked Deng Yuanbo curiously. Deng Yuanbo shook his head and said slowly, "These are consumables." "Consumables?" Zhang Yi was a little surprised. "These are just embryos, how can they be consumables?" "Mr. Deng, I don't quite understand what you're saying." Chapter 2092, The Method to Defeat Hades. Deng Yuanbo smiled. He looked at Zhang Yi and said lightly, "The important information you brought back from Chernobyl has been of great help to us. It also allowed us to understand the true source of the mutants' abilities. It's people's thoughts, isn't it?" Zhang Yi had indeed told Deng Shintong about this information. And this was no secret to many underground civilizations. Even the upper echelons of the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Xinjiang region, and Colombia knew about it, or at least had a general understanding of these secrets. Deng Yuanbo nodded. The essence of supernatural powers comes from the spiritual power of the ether, so when a large number of creatures die, a large amount of spiritual power is released into the world. It is absorbed by the remaining creatures, causing mutations. I believe that the ruler of the ether regularly cleanses the creatures of this world. Because as long as they continue to reproduce indefinitely, they will constantly draw spiritual power from the ether. Just imagine, in this boundless universe, there is no war, and even if people experience birth, aging, sickness, and death, once technology develops and humans develop the resources of the universe, there will be no shortage of resources to support a large population. Then the number of humans could reach hundreds of billions, or even infinity. Zhang Yi nodded. "There is nothing wrong with what you say. But what does this have to do with what you are doing?" He pointed to the terrifying number of embryos. "You want to breed a large population to provide spiritual energy?" Deng Yuanbo smiled and said with his hands behind his back, "Based on the information you provided, we conducted precise experiments. 3 months after conception, the embryos begin to develop a faint consciousness. It is from this moment that spiritual energy appears in their bodies. And there's one thing you may not know, Mr. Zhang Yi. That is, the spiritual power of babies are actually stronger than that of adults." At this point, Zhang Yi finally understood what Deng Yuanbo was doing. "You're exploiting a loophole in this world? By artificially creating embryos and cultivating them to 3 months old, you can obtain a portion of their spiritual power. Then, extract it?" Zhang Yi's mind was a little confused. He looked at the newly formed embryos and was deeply shocked. But at this moment, he didn't know what to say. This matter had already touched upon the levels of human ethics and morality. Deng Yuanbo said, I know that this may be difficult for you to accept at first. But I can assure you that we are not the first to do this. This is just like the Reaper of Love. Such a simple principle of physics can result in such enormous destructive power. We will regularly collect reproductive cells from the mutants in the city, then screen and cultivate them to select the best cells. Then we will carry out the fertilization process and cultivate them into embryos. In this way, during the formation of these embryos, it is possible that genetic mutations will occur due to the genes of the father and mother. Then the spiritual content of these embryos will be even higher. Deng Yuanbo adjusted his reading glasses, put his hands behind his back, and said, This is science. It is also the fastest way to save humanity and quickly gain power in the end times. This planet has already existed for 4.6 billion years. It contains vast resources, but during these 4.6 billion years, countless advanced life forms have been born. Each generation will do everything possible to gather all valuable resources before the end of the world. By the time our generation arrives, our technological civilization will be far behind other races, and the resources left to us will be those that they don't want. Deng Yuanbo raised a finger, but the Creator is fair. We still have one option left. Zhang Yi remained silent, completely at a loss for words. Even Deng Shintong stood to the side, looking shocked and struggling with his emotions. Deng Yuanbo was right, this experiment could indeed gain a large amount of spiritual power in a short period of time. However, it always gave people a feeling that it was against human morality. The others followed in the shadows and stared at the huge laboratory in front of them, speechless. Zhou Qi was fine as a doctor, she had seen many dramatic scenes. Regarding Deng Yuanbo's theory, she analyzed it from a medical perspective, resting her chin on her hand, human ethics and practicality, this would indeed make ordinary people feel uncomfortable. But from a medical point of view, it's not a bad method. Yang Xia had already run to one side and was vomiting violently. She wiped her mouth and said with a pale face, but this practice looks so disgusting. Zhou Qi said, in the process of medical experiments, there are many things that are much more difficult to accept than this. The others looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Only Yang Xinxin looked excited. Yes, why didn't I think of this method earlier? Genius, what a genius experiment. It wasn't that she couldn't think of it, but that Zhang Yi's companions were all high-level mutants. This method was only suitable for the widespread cultivation of large numbers of mutants, but it was not very effective for high-level mutants. To put it simply, it was like 9 years of compulsory education. Zhang Yi and his friends were all doctoral students or professors, so they didn't need it. However, the development of this technology could comprehensively enhance the national strength of the entire Jiangnan region, no, the entire Huaxu kingdom. The conflict between practical interests and moral ethics caused people to struggle. This struggle was not limited to practical people like Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin. Zhang Yi only asked Deng Yuanbo one question, will they suffer when they die? Deng Yuanbo replied, we will use the most gentle methods to ensure that they do not suffer. Moreover, from a medical point of view, the senses of a 3-month-old embryo are not yet fully developed. In terms of the definition of a human being, they are not yet considered human beings in the legal sense. Deng Yuanbo said a lot, but it was all to dispel Zhang Yi's inner doubts. He spread his hands and said, behind all the glitz and glamour, there must be some things that cannot be exposed to the light of day. Our technology can provide the Huaxu kingdom with a vast amount of spiritual power. You should understand how precious that is. Zhang Yi took a deep breath and said, let's get out of here first. Looking at the vast number of embryo culture vessels, he really couldn't bear it. But just then, he heard Yang Xinxin's slightly excited voice in his ear. Brother, I've found a way to defeat the Hades gatekeeper. Zhang Yi was taken aback. What is it, Xinxin? Did you figure out a new idea?